Well, hello everyone. This is Cynthia, and welcome to Revived and Restored. And today, again, we have the ladies that meet at the gathering with me, and a small portion of us, but
Yeah, hi.
yeah, this Kim Benavides and,
Oh.
and not Kim Benavides. I'm sorry,
Kim
I'm
Daniel.
looking at you and seeing Kim Daniel and
That's okay.
Valencia.
It's a
Benavides.
mashup.
Sorry about that. I'm thinking Kim, and then I look at
Me.
Valencia, who's Benavides. I think I had too much caffeine this morning.
You're amped.
No, I don't know. It's kind of silly. But anyway, today we're talking about the imposter. We're in a book in chapter 4 of Waking Up Gray, and it's been such an amazing journey walking with an amazing group of ladies at the gathering that we have. And I said, this is like my 4th time doing this, and every time I do it, it's like it takes me a little deeper and even more revelation of the calling of God on our lives and our Creator and about eternity in a whole nother perspective, right?
Yeah.
And His goodness and His glory and His holiness, His majesty, and it's just been a wonderful, wonderful journey, and to be able to walk through it in community,
Yeah.
and that's the importance, is having
Yeah.
community that are seeking truth and righteousness and God,
So one of the things that's been
Mhm.
mentioned in our group is how difficult this chapter has been.
Mhm.
For people that have gone through it
Yeah.
before, they would get stuck here. For
Mhm.
me, I am having a hard time just really absorbing all of it.
Yeah.
I hear it and
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, Lord, help me go through this. I'm not sure.
Yeah. It's
So
a
because
deep
it's a
dive.
it's a concept that this
Mhm.
is probably the first time that I've heard it mentioned this way.
Mhm. Yeah.
In looking at the psychological wounding of people, you think of personality splits. This is not that. But it is a piece of what we do as people to hide the things that hurt when we've been hurt.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And just trying to figure out, and that's where the imposter comes from.
Yeah.
But
And it kind of, say a personality split, but it kind of is when you're not walking in the true identity of who God created us to be.
that's true.
And people don't want to acknowledge that, in a sense of when trauma comes when we're children, you don't know how to process through it. You don't know how to,
Mhm.
there's no one teaching you or being there to bring comfort, to show you the true perspective, right?
Mhm.
So especially when there's been sexual trauma
Mhm.
in any way, shape, or form,
Yeah.
which kind of where our country is right now, and
Mhm.
they're getting more and more traumatized, especially with this whole movement of transgender. And I'm going to say it because that's what it is, and it's stealing children's identities.
Mhm.
And those who walk in their identities have been stolen. Now, one thing I love about it is that the imposter, in order for there to be true healing, has to come out of hiding. And they have to, but the thing is, they need to be accepted and embraced,
Mhm.
and not in the sense to stay there. It's just so that there can be healing.
Mhm.
There can be true healing and restoration in the very core of our souls, right? In our
Mhm.
identity. And, and when you live in that imposter life, and when you're driving through this, you don't realize you're living it.
Mhm.
And it's truly living outside of God's presence.
Mm.
It's living outside of His purpose. It's
Mhm.
living outside of His love.
Mhm.
And even to the point of, like, you don't know why you respond a way we do to when something's not going our way, or something is kind of off for us or whatever, and we might respond. We get angered.
Right.
And I'm not talking about anger at injustice. I'm talking about just normal everyday life things, and how we handle or respond to things. We get stressed, we get anxiety. Those are all not living in the full embrace of who God. And it's a learning process. It's a part of a journey. It doesn't happen overnight because of everything that's gone in our life. And I love how she walks us through to go there to find out, what is my false self.
Mhm.
Right.
And I used to believe so many lies about who I was because of what happened to me sexually, and even name calling, or things that were spoken to me, and the belief system that this is me, when it really was not me. And it took a long journey to start realizing, and I still battle with certain things, like there's residual things that still happen even to this day that God is like, is that what you're hearing from me?
Yeah.
Like, no. So it's kind of anyways, like, so to acknowledge that we do have false selves. We
Mhm.
identify with falsehoods,
Yeah.
and we have to acknowledge it in order to fully come alive in what we were created for and who we really are.
Yeah.
So, what's it been like for each of you? Like, let's go there. Going through this, I know it's been a
Yeah. Wow. I feel like it just, like Kim was mentioning, a lot of
Mhm.
people, this has been a sticking place, and it absolutely has been for me. I actually went through went through this previously again, like, and then we're revisiting. And I'm like, wow, like I still trying to move through just answering the daily questions and things like that is just, it's a really deep dive because um when we have a blind spot,
Mhm.
we're blind to it.
Yeah.
We don't
Yeah.
know it's there. And so, as we walk with Christ, he starts peeling back those layers. And so we do, if we are able to get to a place of honesty, we can
Mhm.
start seeing some things. I think for me, I feel like there are layers, so it's kind of hard because it's hard to figure out, okay, well, which thing is it really,
Mhm.
where this all began, or even just knowing like the point, like an event. She talks a little bit too about like creative wounds, and I think I have some of those, but I don't think that's um, at this point, I have not discovered like that's my issue
Mhm.
that would make the imposter come up. But maybe I just haven't worked through that part yet.
Mhm.
I feel like God has brought a lot of things to memory, like during art school, which were kind of like
Mhm.
surprising. I'm like, oh, that's clearly a wound because I remember that, and it's like still kind of like, ooh, tender to think about. Um, but the thing that stood out to me is at the very beginning of this chapter. Um, it says, a life devoted to the cult of the shadow, so your shadow self,
Mhm.
is what is called a life of sin. To cherish our illusions of self-sufficiency is to be
Mhm.
our own God. Whoa.
Yeah.
That like hit hard for me.
Mhm.
And I think it's because very likely at least one of, and I feel like sometimes we have various layers of
Mhm.
imposters, right, that we have built through to get through life. I think mine probably is more like a controlling self-sufficiency
Yeah.
kind of thing,
Yeah.
perfectionism, and then that creates anxiety and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
so just a lot of striving has, all those things are things that I have struggled
Mhm.
with. And to just realize that, ooh, that's like making yourself a god. Like I would never want to do that. I would never
Mhm.
knowingly create something that puts me in that position. And I've never, I had never even thought of it that way.
Mhm.
And it's like, woof, that's terrible. I don't want to be that,
Mhm.
So I'm unpacking that still.
Yeah.
But that's
I
where
think
I am.
I think that's where a lot of well, in our world today and the things that we're battling is the self-sufficiency.
Mhm.
And because we make up our own belief system about who we are based on what's we've experienced.
And what we've accomplished.
Yes, and what we've accomplished. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. In that. And I think but as little children, it starts there.
Mhm.
And it begins to form even more and more, and the more the enemy can bring against us in who we are to make it a solid belief system,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
It's kind of a it's really, I think that is when you acknowledge that point of where you have to when you come before the Lord to lay that all down, to say, Lord, I want you to lift me up and show me and teach me who am
Who
I.
am I?
Yeah.
And who was I created to be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it starts there in that place of not denying him. I remember thinking, if I had to deal and face some of this stuff and accept a different me, that I would actually not be here anymore.
Mhm.
It's just weird. It's so twisted and perverted,
Mhm.
right? That if I have to deny that, then I'm denying then I don't exist.
Ooh.
But something the Lord taught me too was that in the demonic realm, especially when you've been harmed, demons are real.
Oh, yeah.
And I had many of them. And, I remember the Lord was showing me how sometimes my emotions are their emotions because they've become a part of me.
Mhm.
And part of my disassociating or things that were happening there was me, but I attached to a demonic belief system
Mhm.
that I took on their identity. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And so those emotions were part of me, and
Mm.
it took a while for the Lord to separate that from me
Mhm.
and to find out that little child that was hurting.
Mhm.
Does
Yeah.
that make sense? And it might be
It does. It does.
just the way that our brains and our whole psyche is made. God define us so amazingly, and it gets when we're out of God's will and
Mhm.
things happen to us. That's when we're sinned against, or even when we commit sin,
Mhm.
it separates us from His presence until Jesus comes on the scene.
Mhm.
Till we let Him in to come on that scene, then He
Into
can
that area.
open that up and show us who we really are. It's just a powerful. That's why we need the blood. That's why we need Jesus
Yeah.
and His resurrection.
So I keep going back to a time when my mother told me I was just like my father, but it was in such a hateful way.
Mm.
I know my dad loved me. I don't have major areas of wounding that, like the trauma, I don't recognize that.
Mhm.
And I don't know if it's the Lord gave me just a cushion because of knowing I was loved, because my sisters went through the same things I did, and it definitely hurt them. But there was a resiliency that must have just been built into me. But I still hear that voice of, you're just like, and that hatred. And it was a controlling me. I was supposed to be exactly what my mom expected of me instead of being who I was supposed to be. And I think I probably have a shell around me that I don't even recognize. Like you were saying, you're blind to it, but on the inside I'm comfortable, but that comfortable part needs to break out, and I know that.
Mhm.
So
That where the imposter hides.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's powerful. We'll pray through that one too. It's like
Yeah.
that's really, I wonder how many people, because when you don't know that what you don't know,
Mhm.
and I think it's there hidden somewhere, but because you didn't have words to, even when you're a child, you don't have
Right.
the words
yeah.
to express it.
Mhm.
Then as you get older, that place is still there, but you don't know
You don't
why.
recognize it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or what is it?
Well, like,
You know?
what's you don't understand the origin or like the root, like why do I do this thing that I'm doing, or why do I think things like that? But I have a similar situation too. I was compared to my dad. They even used to call me Little Henry
Wow.
sometimes. And frequently that was a bit of a jab. It was not necessarily like a positive thing. And I heard that from my grandmother, who is his mom. It was a little bit like when I was being particularly stubborn or headstrong or not maybe doing what they wanted me to do, or I was like too opinionated, too whatever. And then my mom would also say that a little bit, but just framed a little differently. And it's like, oh, these are people, and my sisters, my older sisters, my half sisters would say that too. So it was it wasn't positive. They did not mean it in a positive way. That was very clear. And then to go on to become an adult and know all the things and reasons, and they had those feelings and stuff. It's like, ooh, yeah, you said that about me like repeatedly. So that is hard.
So what's the imposter that came up? I mean, that's what I'm trying to figure out for myself is, what have I built up? I know that I've had a lot of fear, but that wasn't fear that came from that type of a message.
Mhm.
Um,
So then you think like where is that line too between what we create as far as because of our belief system, this imposter that we create, and then also what happens when like especially if it's a repeated thing, right? But there's like a word curse situation happening potentially there too. Like
Well, my thought is like, why was it put as a negative? Why couldn't have been a positive?
the positive would have been I was being strong. I was being able to think for myself and think something new, different than what my mom wanted me to think, the same type of thing, that
Mhm.
controlling. And I think that's who God created me to be, was a strong person. I've stepped through a lot of fear and watched the fear crumble, which has
Mhm.
given me strength. And I know that I've leaned on the Lord to become that way, stronger,
Mhm.
able to speak truth, able to speak in love, but knowing that because He loves me in that place of being strong, I don't have to hurt people with it. I don't have to use it to be harsh or
Yeah.
Mhm.
hurting.
So was that what your dad was? Was he harsh and hurting? Is that
No,
well?
he was.
So why would they think that that was a negative? Is what I'm.
Because I wasn't doing what my mom wanted. My mom was a very controlling person.
Oh.
So I wasn't bowing to that control. I was standing up for what was right, but not doing it in a way that was rude or ugly or disobedient, even. It was just, but this is right.
I don't agree with you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
But for you, do you think the imposter, like where do you feel like the imposter came? Is that you were silenced?
probably,
Mm-hmm.
probably because I did not talk. I was very fearful of speaking
Mm-hmm.
out, speaking up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but over time, the Lord has let that go
Mm-hmm.
where I can speak. It's okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty common in most families. You're going to see where I think most people do it. I don't know about
Comparison stuff.
comparisons
Mhm.
and all, yeah.
Yeah, it does. It happens.
Mhm.
And people, I mean, a lot of times people are just very unaware.
Mhm.
I mean, I feel like the world at large is very unaware of the words.
Yeah.
Like if you just start really, when you get really spiritually tuned, you start realizing, wow, people curse each other without
Mhm.
realizing it. We say all kinds of
And
things.
Christians, a lot of
Oh
Christians.
yeah. And
Mhm.
ourselves,
Yeah.
like we curse ourselves.
Yes. Yes.
We, I mean, everybody, it's very like a
Power of the tongue.
tearing down and just speaking things over your circumstances and stuff and just not realizing it. I mean, I'm certainly have been guilty of that too. Yeah, but you start to realize, wow, there's so much damage that we do with our tongues for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that probably is reinforcement for those imposter things too that get created because people are coming alongside and confirming
Mhm.
your belief system,
Mm-hmm.
that you're creating there. So,
I like that where she's got our false self stubbornly blinds each of us to the light and the truth of our own emptiness and hollowness.
mm,
It's hard, it's saying we cannot acknowledge that darkness
Mhm.
within.
Mhm.
And then that's the importance of walking in community and going through the word and seeking Jesus, is that we're there, but we champion each other on not to shame or condemn.
Mhm.
And the whole thing I liked was she said that you you have to get a point where you embrace that imposter, right? And you accept it, not to stay in it, but of being comforted,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And like, wow, I've been believing this lie about who I've been all this time.
yeah.
I'm not the same person, but there was a part of me. It's like I remember when I would get in the presence of God and I would experience myself with Him.
Mhm.
I felt so free and so
Mhm.
loved, so seen, so heard, and with all the other stuff. But it was like this beautiful me. And then when I'm back, myself, I'm like,
Oh,
oh man, that's really me though.
yeah, that is.
But you
That
connect
is.
to it. Like
Yeah.
when you feel that,
Mm-hmm.
you can connect to the fact that's truth
Yes.
actually about myself.
Yes.
You know, there's where I'm walking
Mhm.
right now, and sometimes that's like muddy,
Yeah.
you know. But you can. I feel like our spirit recognizes
Mhm.
the truth when we come into it. Right when we're in the
Mhm.
presence of God, we can feel the reality. You know, His reality for us. And I think that's transformative. I mean, I think
Yes,
that's how
it is.
life
Yes.
change happens,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Yes.
It's like that little bit of time with Him creates something in us that cannot be taken away,
Yeah.
cannot
Mhm.
be lied about anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. There's so much I think that we can go into too that I want to stay on this probably the next few weeks.
Yeah,
we can
this
go
is
through
a
because
very
That might be
deep
a
one.
good
it's so
idea.
powerful. I mean, I love the one where it says, hatred of the imposter is actually self-hatred.
Mm-hmm.
I'll share this story with you is that when we were filming the documentary, Another Child, and that, when we were traveling stuff, we were back in my Indiana, the state, and there was a young man whose mom was in prostitution, and they asked if I could meet with him and pray with him and talk with him. And he grew up in that life, right? So he was harmed, very much harmed. He had multiple personalities. And so during a time that I was there with him and they were filming, and I kind of, in the spirit we're not using this in the documentary because it's not I want to honor him and respect him, and I don't want to exploit him. So anyway, during that time, he had one personality that was very angry and the other one that hated that one.
Anger.
And a lot of anger. So in that process, I was able for him to see that he needed to forgive that, because that when he was in that persona, he did a lot of bad things too. There was so much self-hatred. But in this other personality he took on, didn't want anything to do with that. But I had to reconnect, I didn't have to, but God did this. Okay. The Lord showed me to walk him through where he had to forgive himself and to let it go and let God take and heal and receive forgiveness. And it was like during that, and there was a lot of warfare during that time, at the point where that thing almost attacked me, and the camera crew people were ready to pounce on him.
Wow.
But it got real intense. But then all of a sudden the Lord just shifted, and you watched. I felt we had angels in the room and everything, and it just integrate him back to himself. That I got to see a visual of it. Like I've experienced it myself for me, but to see it with someone else too, to how the Lord heals that, because that self-hatred was so strong.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so strong.
Wow.
And visually to see it. And that's kind of what I remembered of it. But it's like, it's just a powerful example how God brings the healing. The Lord, Jesus is just such a caring and loving, and he wants it all brought to the light, but let him walk it through. And we want to hold on to because no, this is who I am, because this happened. This is who I am.
Right.
And,
it talks about cherishing, like that we're not good at identifying illusions, especially the ones that we cherish most about ourselves. I'm like, ooh, that we cherish that.
Yeah.
We cherish
We
that.
cherish
ugly,
the
stinky
lie.
thing.
Yeah, we cherish the lie. It's like, oof.
But we do have to accept it, or else it can't be brought to the Lord.
Yeah.
I keep thinking back, one of the first books I read as a baby Christian was Hind's Feet on High Places.
It's one of my favorite books. I love it.
And that picture of the different seeds that are planted in our heart and grow, it's like this, where the Lord has planted righteousness in us, and if we let it grow, there is the ugly thing that has been planted, the hatred, the anger. It's going to grow, but it's not up to us to make the difference. We have to bring them both to the Lord, and he'll be the one that pulls out that bad seed. And then we can see the perfect seed that he's planted in us and rejoice in it. But and let him be the one even who identifies that seed in us. We don't have to dig ourselves up and
No, you can't do it alone. You
Mm-mm.
can't. The healing can only be happen with Jesus as
Mhm.
He brings it, forward. And the thing where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom,
Yes.
and that's one of the things that I've learned over the years too. I can even be, and I love having, because the Spirit of the Lord comes into our gathering meetings, and things
Mhm.
happen, and there's healing
Yeah.
that happens. But when you're just meeting just to meet, and you don't invite Holy Spirit into it, there's not going to be healing.
Mm-mm.
There might be a stronger wall that's built when you come together with like-minded people who have similar things, like, how
We can
oh,
all agree with it and say,
yeah,
yeah, that's a good thing,
yeah,
and it's really not a good thing.
no, and that comes in any community of people, whether you're gathering
Mhm.
together with a similar,
Yeah.
um, what I want to say, um,
Imposter.
yeah, you're gonna it's gonna reinforce that. But if you come to gather to meet Jesus, to spend time in His presence and let Him be the one, He'll walk us all through that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so, for those who are listening, if you are never thought about the imposter within you too, I pray that you'll walk with a group of people, like you'll in your community that God's brought up. If not, reach out to us, and we'd love to talk with you and help
Yeah.
you through that. But this book is amazing. It's called Waking Up Gray by Jenny Shute, and The Creative Awakening. We're in chapter 4. We're going to continue this conversation in the next few weeks, probably, because I feel like there's so much to talk about.
Yeah. It's a meaty
And
one.
yeah. But any last we got 1 second left. I don't we have any more last thoughts, but thanks for listening, and we'll be back.
Okay. Bye.